1980 for the purpose of discovering and appraising properties for ad valorem tax purposes for each taxing unit within the boundaries of the district. The district has approximately 1.8 million parcels of property to assess each year with a total market value of approximately $588 billion. The appraisal district in Harris County is the largest in Texas, serving approximately 500 taxing units and one of the largest appraisal districts in the United States. The Houston Chronicle named the district a top workplace in 2017, 18, and 19 from among 84,000 Houston area employers. And as always, you can find them at hcad.org. And I guess real quickly, if there's any questions that you've got, if you'll put them in the chat, and then we'll probably have some time at the end to see if we can get those answered. So with all that said, I think I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Altinger.
Well, Sam, I hope I can live up to that that description of myself. I'm sitting here listening to it. Do you say all those things? And I'm wondering to myself, like I'm some bad respiratory infection that just grew at the appraisal district over the years to get to where I'm at. Anyhow, I love my job, and I tell you, I love my job. And with regards to that, that's one of the reasons I've stayed at the appraisal district. I believed in the system. I think it's one of the best property tax systems in the world. We can talk about some of the other appraisal districts, but we're in such interesting times. What I'd like to do is I've got a presentation that I can share with y'all shortly, but we'll stay online as long as we have to address any questions that you might have with regards to my office. You know, normally speaking to different groups, you've got to kind of conform your presentation. Obviously, I can't do that because I've got a PowerPoint. But with that said, I just want to tell you that we are living in some of the most interesting times that I've ever lived in. And I will tell you that since I became chief appraiser 4 years ago, every year there has been a hurdle in our office to have to deal with. And this COVID-19 has been one of the most interesting ones for me to deal with, in that I know that we've got some folks from Dan Crenshaw's office and Michael McCall's office. I have never in my entire life in the last few months spoken to more of our elected officials in the House, in the Senate, in the state of Texas, the governor's office, and my entire time has been consumed literally talking to a lot of these politicians. And the one good thing that has come of this, it's educating the folks with regards to what the appraisal districts do in the state of Texas. And, you know, we've had 2 AG issues pop up since March. And the first one, of course, is something that we worked on and we were very instrumental on working on after Harvey. And I worked with some folks in Austin on both the House and the Senate side to deal with disasters. And this first one was dealing with Harvey. And when you look at our budget, it is about $90 million. And we do all the appraisals for all the properties in Harris County at roughly $50. It was just right at $50 per parcel. And you all know, when you do go get purchase a house, you end up having to get a fee appraiser. And that fee appraisal will basically value that property for the loan that you're going to get on your property. And they're going to charge probably $650 to $750 to do so. And we do it for $50 per parcel. And when Harvey rolled around, we ended up having to do the disaster reappraisal under the old statute, and it had never been touched since 1979 when it was created under the Pivotal Bill, Senate Bill 621 in 1979. And for us to do that, it was not cost effective. And that's why we went to, I spent a lot of time in Austin trying to get that changed. And we came up with a bill and it passed, and it was to deal with disasters. And that segues me into the first thing that we had happen. And that was, we had a disaster called COVID-19, and everybody was wanting to know with regards to, is this a disaster? And was that the intent of the law when it was passed? And that was the first AG opinion that we had to deal with. And the AG opined that it is not considered a disaster Because what would have happened is the taxing jurisdictions would have had to, it's a financial thing. If they had passed their tax rate or if they had not passed their tax rate on the amounts that they could go up or not go up. And the people would be provided an exemption. And as you all know, when you have a situation like this and you have the job losses that we've had, it is concerning. And I say it's concerning in that, we have a duty to appraise all the properties in the county. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a news reporter, and I had, during this pandemic, literally just decided I don't like to shave, and I didn't shave. And my chief communications officer came in and said, so-and-so wants to talk to you. And I said, well, can you handle it? Because I had stuff that I was doing in the office. He said, no, he's demanding to speak to you. Well, needless to say, I did the interview. I had a beard on, and I had all these people that know me call me up and says, you need to get rid of that beard. You're really, really uglier now than you've ever been in your entire life. So I shaved it. Anyhow, so the first AG opinion was the disaster exemption that we had to deal with. The AG opined that this is not a disaster. The second AG opinion was, we have to give property owners due process rights to come into our office to appeal the valuation that we've placed on their business personal property account or on their property that they own, whether it's an office building downtown or it's their residential property that they own. And we started doing a lot of WebEx hearings with property owners and business owners, and the AG now said that we have to be able to do those ARB hearings face to face. So in one hand, we've got this pandemic we're trying to deal with to create social distancing. On the other side, the AG says, well, you've got to open your doors and let people come in and have those hearings. And so those are the two hurdles that we've been dealt. And I'm going to see if I have the capability to share the screen, and I'm going to run through a presentation that I have here and just go through it fairly quickly. And for some reason, it's not moving forward. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my slide is not advancing for some reason. Okay, there it goes. Okay. All right. First of all, we are a political subdivision, and we have representation from the various taxing entities. And of course, Harris County, I know we've got two on the line that are from Metro, and Jim Robinson was my former boss at the appraisal district. I worked with him for years, and he sits on our board. So the two folks from Metro can call him up and say, the chief appraiser did a presentation today and he did a terrible job. But on the same token, they can't call him up and say, hey, my property should be lower and you need to do something about it. Because these folks that are on this board have various responsibilities, and one of them is and I'll share that shortly, but you see the representation from the various board members. They represent obviously the big three jurisdictions, which of course is the county, the city of Houston, and Houston Independent School Districts. And then you have representation from the other school districts, which we call the urban cities. And then of course, other school districts other than the HISD. And then you have the conservation and reclamation districts. And then our tax assessor collector sits on as an ex officio officer on our board. Some of these responsibilities are to appoint the chief appraiser. I'm not an elected position. It's not an elected position in the state. And every legislative session, that's something that we have to go argue with the legislators because they want to make it elected. And I tell people, I said, in a lot of the testimony that I've done in Austin is, I'm going to run on the platform that I'm going to take the almost $600 billion that we have the valuations on in Harris County, and I'm going to drop it to $300 billion. Thus, I'm going to cut your taxes in half. Vote for me. Well, it would basically erode the tax base, and I don't think it's a good bill. And it gets put up every year by somebody, and we ends up dying because they realize it's not good a bill. But you never know what might happen in these days. The second responsibility the board has is to appoint the taxpayer liaison officer. That's Teresa Terry. She acts on behalf of property owners when they have issues within our office. Then, of course, I mentioned our $90 million budget. And then the ARB is, and this is something that, we always look, and I say the administrative district judge appoints the appraisal review board. And those are the members that listen to your case when you come in and you appeal in front of the ARB. They sit in panels of 3. The district has representation at that meeting, and then the property owner or business owner presents their case, and the ARB is basically a quasi-judicial group that then renders an opinion of value. They do get paid, so if you know anybody that's looking for a part-time job, and I say it's part-time, they do hearings pretty much through the summer months, and they get paid, and we always need folks because they always have a hard time getting the 190 ARB members that we have. Anyhow, size of the job is just gargantuan. As I stated earlier, I tell people we're the largest appraisal district in the galaxy, and we are. That does a complete reappraisal of all properties in Harris County every year. So we look at we do the valuations every year as of January 1st. And as of January 1st this year, we didn't have a pandemic. We had all the valuations complete, and we were complete at the end of February. And then in March, we started to do the noticing, and we started doing the noticing exactly at the same time we had the pandemic come about. And it was a statutory thing that a lot of folks in Austin had talked about. They had talked about rolling values from 2019 to 2020. That's where I talked to a lot of the politicians in Austin and said, well, the statute says that we have to appraise it as of January 1st. You've had arguments from various, all you got to do is Google this. You've had arguments from local politicians against the state politicians. And ultimately, when you look at what we do is we put a value out there. The taxing jurisdictions then set a rate, and then of course it creates the tax bill. And back to the size of the job, we have an appraisal district. We've got 650 employees, and people say, well, can you be the largest in the galaxy? And I said, well, if you go to Chicago, for example, that is the second largest appraisal district, they literally have politics that are involved in their appraisals. And even as of today, depending on your precincts, depending on if you're an R or a D, depending on how the voting goes, will be dependent on how the valuation is. This past 2 years ago, they had an election, and there was a Democrat that was running the appraisal district and another Democrat that ran against him and ended up winning. And his MO is to straighten out the politics. And I've worked with him on some of the things to eradicate some of the problems that they have there. And we don't need to go into that. The head of the House in their state and the head of the Senate on their state are both property tax consultants and attorneys who fight the appraisal district. So they've got their own problems up there. Then, of course, if you shoot to the left side of the United States and go to California, you go to LA County, which is where they have Proposition 13, and that is you pay taxes based on the value of your property the year that you acquire it. And then, of course, it's attached to an inflationary factor that it goes to all the properties the same. Anyhow, so we do these valuations every year. It is a very difficult job. There's tax deadlines that we have to adhere to that will show you. And then, of course, Texas is one of the 11 states in the United States that does not have sales disclosure. I tell people this is the blood in our bloodline that allows us to do our job, and not having sales disclosure is very difficult, but we do get sales from various sources, and we're able to do a pretty darn good job. We get studied by the state every year, and we can talk about that in details. And then, as you mentioned, top workplace, that was one of my goals. Then I told to the board when they hired me, I said, I have a goal to be a top workplace, because I think if the people that work for you are happy, they're going to do a better job. And we manage on values, on our core values. Anyhow, moving along, equal and uniform issues, those are difficult for us. Some of the dates that I want to tell you, there's 4 pieces of pie that make up our tax calendar. The first phase is the valuation phase that we do at the appraisal district. The second phase is the protest and hearing phase. And then, of course, that's what they refer to as equalization. And then, of course, you've got the assessment and collection that is done outside of our office. That's done by the 500 taxing jurisdictions. So we take care of the first half of the pie. And then I'll think of that 4th or 5th bullet where it says the ARB approves the roll, and then the chief appraiser has to certify that roll. we have to do that by statute by July 25th. And we, however, have a little exclusion because of our size compared to all the other appraisal districts in the state, and we get it done by August. But because of the social distancing, we have 40 rooms that we have 40 panels that we have rooms, and they're fairly small. If you've been to the appraisal district, when we put 3 ARB members in there, we put the a district representative in there, and then of course the property owner or business owners come into that room and present their case. Those rooms do not allow social distancing. So we're been at the office, we're having to take those 40 rooms, and thank God they back up to each other, where we're removing the walls just so we can have to deal with the social distancing issue so we can do our hearings. Yesterday, I was on a call with Representative Shine's office, and you know, we've done great things so far. However, when you run 40 panels for the entire month of June, July, August, and into September, and you can only run 20 panels a day, how do you get your job done? So that's a big issue, because we have to certify that tax roll so the taxing jurisdictions can set their rate, and so they can then mail out the bills, and then the bills can then fund the government. And that's the police, the fire, everything that we have here in this county. Moving right along to the expectations of property owners and business owners, I tell people we're the bologna in the sandwich, because we have the property owners and business owners that want us to do the job right. Then, of course, the property tax consultants, then, of course, have, you know, they protest accounts for people, and you yourself can do it. And I suggest that people do it themselves. They know their property better than anyone else. However, when you look at the 400,000 protests that we get out of the 1.8 million parcels we appraise, about 75% are represented by consultants. You don't have to be an attorney to do this. You can do it yourself. And I'll show some of the services that we do prior to that point. But then, of course, we're under the TDLR, which is the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. We have standards under USPAP that we have to adhere to. Then, of course, all the legislative mandates that we deal with, and that's pretty much a tax code that when I started back in 1988 was about 1/4 inch thick, and now it's over 1 inch thick. Then, of course, the studies that the comptroller does on our office is they do that property value study that determines whether school districts get funding or not, because if you've got some appraisal districts, if they want to keep values low, it's under the school that they have to appraise at market value. So they do that property value study. We get studied every year, every odd year. And on the even years, we have what we call a MAP review, where they do the review on governance, taxpayer assistance, operating procedures, and appraisal standards and methods. Anyhow, when you look at our 10-year average with regards to what we do, I said we do the valuations at about $50 per parcel, and you don't need to go into detail on that. Anyhow, so how do we deal with 400,000 protests? Years ago, we used to get these in by mail, and when you get that many protests, it's hard to deal with them. And we've been very technical with regards to advancements. We were the first in the United States to allow a property owner to file online, and that's what we call our iFile, where they can file their protest online. We did that in 2004. In 2007, we created iSettle, where the property owner can settle their account online with us without having to come to the comforts leave the comforts of their home, especially right now. Then, of course, we did the iReschedule. Express informals are the equivalent of iSettle with the property tax consultants, and of course, evidence upload, which has helped us tremendously, where we upload the evidence, and we started that in 2017 for property owners and also the property tax consultants. So from a governmental standpoint, I think we run I tell people we need to run our office like the private sector. We have no reason to be in business, and I think we do that. We don't need to talk about Hurricane Harvey unless you have some questions on that. This is probably the part of the presentation that you want to see. And as you all know, and this was as of this year, but we were in the longest U.S. expansion in history with regards to a great economy. And of course, with COVID-19, that's changed things drastically. And that's where the big uproar came, with property owners wanting to have us revalue the property based on this coronavirus. How that's going to play out, though, is going to be played out based on what we do as buyers and sellers in the marketplace right now, and how we advance into the 2021 valuation cycle. And then, of course, the one that concerns me more than the COVID-19 virus is that West Texas intermediate oil price. And as you can see, that thing dropped like a bad habit. In fact, it went negative for a few days. And I think that's more of a concern to us locally, especially in the state of Texas, because we're so, a lot of our GDP is in the oil industry. They were talking, I was reading an article not too long ago that there might be upwards of 200,000 jobs here in Harris County that might be lost because of that. That is probably our biggest concern. And I say our biggest concern, we value the properties, whether the values are going up or down. And I'll show you a map here shortly with regards to what we do. Anyhow, you can then look at the job growth in the United States and Houston. And as you can see, Houston was below there in the 16, 17, and then of course it popped up above. So job growth is very important to a strong economy. Now, this map right here, it depicts, this is what I call my Granimals map. As a kid, I don't know, I know I'm not colorblind, but I did not know how to match clothing properly. And for you all that know the Granimals, my mom bought clothes for that. If in the collar they had a lion, then you needed to find a pair of trousers or pants that had a lion in it. And if it had a zebra, the zebra you'd have to match. And so you could associate that. And this is what I call my Granimals map, because when you look at the valuations here and you see red, it means the values in the county are going up. And this is done by pixels. We can also do it by polygons of the property. Then, of course, you look at the yellow, and that means that there's no change in value, and green means it's going down. So literally everybody thinks that we raise values 10% every year, and that's not the case. We go out there, we look at sales, we do a valuation based on those properties, and everybody remembers the statistics where you take a appraisal to sales ratio analysis, you take a recent appraisal or a recent sale, and then you divide it by the appraisal district's valuation. And that appraisal can be done independently, and that's part of what the state does, is they come in and do an independent appraisal based on their information. And an appraisal is an opinion of value, and you get a bell curve distribution. And I tell people the statute states that we have to appraise those properties at 100% of market value. But we know that if you have every property in that jurisdiction at 100% of market value, that means you've got half of your population overvalued and the other half undervalued. So the way you look at that is 97, is if you had a 3% variation and you look at 97 to 103%, you had the majority of your properties appraised that way, you'd have them appraised in that strata of 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, and 103. And in Harris County, we try to reach the valuation at about 97% of market value, 97, 98. And in doing so, you then see the map either light up in red, meaning the values are going up, or going down. And you can see in the years where in 2000, well, we don't have 2008 and 2009, but in 2008, when we had that downturn in the market, you saw the value, the county be completely green because we were lower in values. Here is what 2019 and 2020 look like right here. You see there are some areas where there were some decreases in values. You see the majority of it though was increased. What takes place in Harris County, why we change in our parcel size, is these are the partial creations that occur when, especially out in Cy-Fair, you've got a lot of abstract dirt out there where developers will go in, they will subdivide that and they'll create more parcel creations. And then of course, they're done through what they call subdividing and condo recordings. And you can see, you can track a lot of these curves based on the economies that we've had in the past. Anyhow, moving along to looking at whole inventory, as of January 2020, the inventory of housing in this market was at 3.5 months. And of course, the national average was at 3 months. And a normal market is at about 6%. I'm not 6%, 6 months. And right now with the inventory being low, I've talked to 4 or 5 groups recently, real estate groups in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, and the market is still pretty good. Now, I'll be curious. Of course, one other thing that you have to look at is look at what interest rates have done. The people's purchasing power has increased because the interest rates dropped about 1.5%. Looking at housing starts in the county since 2006, you can look at the actual new construction and the number of single family built. When you look at 2020, you've got almost $4.5 billion in new construction in the county, which of course shows a very strong economy for the area. And then of course, looking at the increases of the sales volume, it went up 4.8% from 2018 to 2019. And then of course, when you look at sales prices, you can see that the average has increased 4.6% and the median has increased 4.5%. Then of course, we plagiarized this because we steal it from the Houston Association of Realtors, which is a great bit of information source, and that's pretty much the graph as it's moved along. What did that do with regards to the first 1 million properties that we've put the notices out on the street? I do not have this updated, and I apologize for that, but the first 1 million plus properties that we put out on the street, you can see the strata under 80,000, 80 to 150, and so forth. And when you look at the percent of parcels, whether there was no change, you see that there was no change of 15.8% of those parcels, 74% went up, and then of course 10% went down. But when you look at the year before in 2019, you were still in a very strong economy. And everybody wants to know in Austin and the local folks is, what is 2021 going to be? And we do not have that information. I don't have a crystal ball that is that good. But right now, the market is still fairly strong. We went the wrong way there. Sorry for that. Then, of course, this looks at the same strata. And if y'all ask, we can provide you this presentation to look at it more in detail. Oil and gas, property. If you have a house, you need to have an exemption. If you qualify for it, you can see all the types of exemptions there in the presentation. We have an app that we won an award for 2 years ago at the International Association of Assessing Officers. I tell people, and I don't know if you can see me, but this phone right here, one of the advancements that we did is we took, and we have an app out there, and we've got it on both platforms, the iPhone app platform and also the Apple platform. And it allows a property owner, just like when you go to the bank, I mean, you don't have to go to the bank to cash a check, you sit there and take a picture of it. Well, the property owner, when they get their driver's license updated and the records updated at the appraisal district, meaning Joe Smith has the property at 1111 Mockingbird Lane, they take a picture of their driver's license, we run it through some gyrations, and within a minute or two, we can provide you the exemption electronically. Something else, it's never been done in the United States. We did it. We got an award for it. I'm proud of our staff for being able to do that with the technology. Anyhow, looking at the differences between the 10% cap and how that's handled, that's a law that's very misconstrued out there in the public even today, even though it was passed in 1997. It said that the appraisal district cannot raise your valuation for tax purposes no more than 10%. However, under the statute, they have to appraise those properties at market value. So when you look at the value increase here on this particular example, it went from 200,000 and it goes up to 250,000. Obviously, that's more than 10%. And you can see how year 2 that the computations put your taxable value at 220,000 and your market value stays at 250,000 unless you come in and protest it. And then, of course, at year 3, it then jumps up another 10% to 242,000. And then, of course, in year 3, you would see it go to 250,000 if that market was, if that value went up to 250 because of the market, and the market then equalized. Here in Harris County, we do not have that. We've got over 7,000 market neighborhoods that we study, and they are always constantly in influx. So that's the 10% cap issue. Here is the difference between what a residential and an over 65 or disabled exemption would get you. This is just looking at a $200,000 house based, looking at it in the county, the school district of HISD in the city of Houston. You can see that if you've got that $200,000 house, you would, instead of paying, let me just do, it's about 3% tax rate, 200,000. Instead of paying about $5,500 in taxes, you would pay almost $3,600 in taxes for your exemption. If you have the residential exemption, then of course the over 65, you would pay $1,436, and your school taxes would be frozen. Anyhow, I'm going to unscreen this. You're sharing a screen. Stop sharing, and we'll go back to the big screen, and we'll address any questions that you might have with regards to providing you that information there.
I'm bringing the chat up now, but I don't think there was a question earlier, but I don't know, it's disappeared. I think one of the questions that I came up with, and I think it's going to be a big question for a lot of business owners, is on the business personal property rendition. We're about to have a real glut of used office furniture as businesses are discovering that their employees can work from home. So all those desks that were worth one value on January 1st, 2020, and now as we're starting to look at it, which is kind of with the disaster declaration, I think that you alluded to, but we don't have that with COVID-19. So I guess what are your kind of thoughts on that? What are you telling people as they are going to start dealing with those valuations as they roll in later in the year here?
Yeah, well, and Sam, it's a great question with regards to evaluation. As you know, that we did it as of January 1st, and for the rendition deadlines, you had stated earlier that you filed a bunch of renditions. We extended all the deadlines as much as we could. The ones that it was easier for us in Harris County just to say we're going to extend all those deadlines because everybody was having to deal with this together. And by extending those deadlines, we didn't have to have someone produce something to us that we then had to work to then let them know that we would extend it. So looking at the office furniture, for example, what will take place, and we don't know, and that's that crystal ball, because, you know, I'm here at my house. I go into the office. I do go into the office because we've got meetings that we have to have there where we've got to look at influx and of bringing the public back in. We at Harris County Appraisal District never shut the door other than to what we call the soft close to the public. We have people working there that are opening mail, that are processing exemptions. We were able to get almost 90% of the staff to work from home. Production skyrocketed. So I'm sure there's folks out there that are thinking, well, you know, my daughter's upstairs in a room up there working with her job, and they're not going to go back to work in the office until September right now. So it's going to be contingent on what takes place in the next, what have we got, 6-8 months of what is going to take place in the workforce. I know that Verizon, for example, is looking at closing stores. And all of that is going to affect that January 1 rendition. And if those businesses have that inventory of that office furniture, there will be, like you said, a supply and demand. There'll be all this office furniture that nobody wants. And of course, then it'll go down in value. They'll render that, and then they'll have that right to come in and protest that in our office or around the state, because these are state laws that we're talking about. So it's an interesting question. I just don't have that crystal ball to tell you what that office furniture is going to be worth until we create that new market. So I think if a vaccine were created fairly quickly, I think people would want to get back to normal. And I say they call that the new normal. We are social creatures, and you know, the meetings that I've had in my office where I bring in some of my executive staff and some of the staff that I need to make some of the decisions that we have to make based on the cards that we've been dealt. People that have been confined for so long come into the office and they automatically want to start talking. And I think that's why our production, overall production on people that do work, we have various mechanisms to see that production go up. But I think it's because part of their day is not doing a little socialization with their coworkers. So I don't know. And I know that I don't want to go out there and say office furniture is going to be 50% less and then everything get back to normal. It's going to be the same. So Sam, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, but if you have me out next year, I can do give you a pretty good idea what it's worth.
Sam, we do have that other question. There's two actually out there now. What do government entities need to most get back to work safely? How can companies fill the gap for safe return to our commercial economy?
Wow. I know there's two folks on the line with Metro. If you look at, and my former boss, Jim Robinson, I mentioned, I talked to him, he's one of my bosses, and they have a bus or a rail system that you put people on, and obviously you can infect the bus, and they're looking at ways of trying to create, I think there was a robot that flashes UVC lighting that can kill the virus. We ourselves, I got our board we had a special meeting in, I think it was at the beginning of April. And I had our board look at putting UVC lighting into our air handlers at our office. The board was able to approve that with it being an airborne virus. And I went and looked at them. We finally got the project complete 2 weeks ago, and I went and looked at them, and you can't look at the lights because they will literally blind you. They say it's looking at someone that's doing welding, and you have that mask on that creates that glare where it won't burn your eyes. They say that it is 100 times stronger than someone doing welding. So that was a cost that we needed. I've got 650 people that work for me that I've got concerns on for their health and safety. I've got the concerns and health and safety for the ARB that comes in our office. And then when we open back up to the public, I've got the concerns and safety for them. And these are some of the dilemmas that we're having to deal with. Providing masks for our employees. We're going to provide 2 masks for each employee that are washable. And we're going to use our values that they take their temperature before they come to the office each morning. If they don't have a thermometer, we'll provide them one. And then we have to have the public come into our office. And what we did is we strategically, if you've not been to our office, I welcome you to come see it. It's a nice governmental building over there at 13013 Northwest Freeway. And we are going to bring the handicapped people in from the front of our building. We're going to bring our vendors in from the east side of our building. We're going to bring the ARB members and our HCAD employees through the south entrance, which allows them to go into the straight to the elevators and go to their respective floors. And then we're going to bring the public and the property tax consultants in from the west side of the building. We had discussions with lawyers. Can we mandate that people bring masks? That they have to wear the mask as they traverse through the building. We're going to restrict the folks from coming to the first floor, leaving the first floor unless they're escorted, because we don't want someone to do something maliciously. I've had someone follow me to Canada. I've had someone follow me to Florida. I've had someone follow me to Las Vegas. And that's concerning in that, I don't want someone to do something maliciously. That I can go on with some of the things that they've done in our office that are not good things to do. But some people don't like the government. And you know what? It's part of the civilization that we have to deal with. Anyhow, going back to getting people in. So if you come to the office, we're going to have some masks there, and we would strongly recommend that you wear them. And I think until we get the virus under control with the vaccination, I think there's a comfort level on both sides. And that's what caused me to do a soft close in our office. We had a lady, she was an elderly lady on the 3rd floor in my public office in the public area. And she sneezed, and one guy literally started chewing her out from head to toe, and another man jumped in. And I thought that I thought there was going to be a major altercation, because now a guy sat there and was defending this elderly lady, and we had our security guard there. And obviously, but it was just one sneeze. So we've installed plexiglass in our counter areas, and for the public when they come in to do their hearings, we're going to have 6 feet separation for the tables where the property owner and the tax consultant could sit. We've got a plexiglass where they can pass information back and forth. So we've done a lot. I'm getting ready to send out an all HCAD email probably at the beginning of the week. It's a plethora of information on how we're going to have to deal with this. And I think the biggest one is the mask. And if y'all have got any good ideas you want to provide to us, because we've had situations where we had a gentleman come to our office and it did not get pretty, and it was talked about in the Capitol for months. I think the guy did it intentionally, but I can't verify that. But if you were to come to my office and I said to you all, hey, here's a mask, would you please wear it? Would you do it? And we can't mandate that. So we're just going to strongly recommend it.
We have two more questions, and then I think we should probably wrap up. We want to be respectful of time. We have a member that's on the call. It said, I received a notice of a receipt of my protest on April 16, 2020, but have not heard yet about rescheduling my protest hearing. Is this normal, or should I have received this by now?
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the date again? Did she get a scheduling notice?
Receipt of the protest on April 16th, but have not heard about rescheduling the protest hearing. Is this normal, or should I have received something by now?
It is one of the things that I'm not very proud of in our office is our customer service right now because of the pandemic. And I'm going to give, if they're on the line, let me give you a number to call, and that's 713-957-7811. And that is to that's the admin's, it's an admin's number, and you need to ask for Janet Jennings Doyle. And she is the director for that division.
Okay.
So 713-957-7811, ask for Janet Jennings Doyle and have her look at the account and look at it specifically.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I apologize for that. You know, as I stated earlier, production went up, but at the same time, I've got to be transparent. And when we're doing things such as our customer service, it has gone down a little bit, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm transparent with it, and we're doing everything we can. In fact, I want to introduce one of the, and I know John Labus introduced himself. I'm so proud to have him on our staff. I'm just stoked. I was hoping this wasn't going to be his first presentation for him to watch me talk about, but he came from the news industry, and it is important to get information out there, and I'm just glad to have him on board.
We have one last general question, if you don't mind, one more, and
Sure.
then we'll end our meeting. If you're purchasing a home with an existing exemption, does that affect the taxes owed on the property?
Okay, and that is a $1 million question, in that if it's a regular homestead, that exemption stays on that property for the entire year. So if you go buy a house in December 31st, you own it and occupy it as of January 1st, you qualify for the exemption, and then you sell that house on January 3rd, that exemption stays with that property. The only key thing is if you're over 65, and if you're over 65, that exemption can be ported, and they call that the portability. So someone that's over 65, and it's for the school tax and the school tax only, if you are paying $500 in taxes, and you should be paying $1,000 in taxes because your school taxes have been frozen, you can do a portability of that 50% to your new school district that you move to. And if you move out to another property and you want the over 65 portion of that added to your property, it will be prorated off on your house. So it is another one of those lovely things that our legislature does, is every 2 years they meet for 140 days, and they change the laws, and they are complex. I mean, that's a good question, but you know, it really has a couple different answers because of the different type of exemption someone could qualify for. So if it's just a regular homestead, they get it for the entire year. There can be a situation where it gets prorated off for the over 65 portion of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Colleen, do you have any last minute you want to close us out?
I think she's on, she's off.
I just said if I can figure out how to unmute. Yes, please. Thank you all very, very much for being here. Thank you so much for the conversation and the presentation and answering questions. We appreciate your very hard work and all that you're doing down there. And I know that talk about technical difficulties. You have done a lot to make that continue to work, because you've got a job, no kidding, about the biggest in the galaxy. We talk about that. Harris County is just incredible. My daughter is here from New York, and she's terrified to set foot outside the house because of what's happening in New York. And we keep saying, it's different here. It's different here.
Yeah.
We cover a lot of space and we don't have as many people at all, but in the square footage, it's so different. But
Can I mention something real quick? Just what I thought of. I will tell you this, you just mentioned your daughter. And I go back to HCAD's not going to make you rich, but it's going to provide stability, and it's going to provide a good place to work. Anybody that, if you have kids, cousins, nieces, nephews that are getting out of college and have a degree, I would love for y'all to send us some resumes. If you get good people, and people sit there and say, I mean, I've had 150 people that I've managed that have no longer worked at HCAD, and it's not, I mean, we manage on values, and we're not like the normal governmental agency where you see people sitting around and not doing anything. If you're not going to do I tell people, give me a good day's work, play by the rules, and have a good attitude. A good attitude goes a long way. And if you're not going to have that, you're not going to work at HCAD. But if y'all got people that we'd love to have them. And then you talk about the size again. One thing I didn't mention is when you look at the property tax base, it's 20% here in Harris County compared to the rest of the state. The next size appraisal district is Dallas, and they're 1/5 our size. But anyhow, continue on. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's amazing. I mean, we don't think about how I mean, we think about it all the time because here we are in unincorporated Harris County in our little area, but Harris County is enormous, and we are so aware of that, but the rest of the world has no idea what we are and what we're dealing with out here. So we're very appreciative of what we do, and we thank you very much for your insight today. If you don't mind, Tabitha, you want to give us a little update?
Hey, yeah. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. I guess the only updates are we're starting to roll things back online. The HOVs are back on for anybody who's having to commute downtown. All of our park and rides are back to running. However, we have modified schedules. So they're only running from 5 to 9 a.m. in the mornings, going inbound to downtown, and 3 to 7 in the evenings. And they're also only running on 15-minute intervals, unlike some of the areas where it typically is 6 minutes. Our red line is already back up to every 6 minutes because of the capacity. We want to keep people moving instead of having too many people in each of the carts. And we're making some modifications to our Metro Lift. So the Metro Lift is for seniors and people with disabilities. We've installed basically sneeze guards between where the drivers sit and where passengers are in the back. We also installed hand sanitizers in the back for customers, and we also provide mats for customers who might want it or need it when they're taking their trips, in addition to cleaning the vehicle between every passenger trip. So we're doing as much as we can, especially as people start getting back online and stores opening. So, but like I said, if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please send them my way.
Thank you very much. And Sherry, are you still on?
No, we lost both Karen and Sherry. So I think
okay, I can't see all this. So I can't tell, are there any more governmental officials or anything? All right, well, I guess then we are done. Sam, you want to say anything else?
No, just a big thank you, Mr. Altinger. I appreciate your time today. That was a lot of great information. And thank you to everyone else for being here. So.
All right, our next meeting will be live, if all goes well, at the chamber offices on August 6th at 8:30 in the morning. So keep your fingers crossed for everything good. And